The world that Charlie and I live in is very toxic at times. The kids. Yeah, the kids. We all thought they were this tragic little family. They weren't his. We found the DNA records later. You had a baby in a house when you were 13 years old and we can't find you. By the way, where's the baby buried? I asked that question to her. And she said, what happened after she gave birth was they told her they called her mom and they said that she's got to go? I said, how do you know the baby was dead? You're telling me they moved you into a room and they induced labor after you said, I don't want to give up my child. If what Candace Owens just hinted at turns out to be real, this doesn't just punch holes in Erica Kirk's story, it flips the entire thing completely upside down. For months, people have been quietly sitting with one heavy and uncomfortable question. Was Erica ever actually pregnant? And if she was it really Charlie's child? Now, those quiet doubts are turning into full and very loud conversations because word circulating behind closed doors is that alleged DNA proof exists and is being discussed among people close to the situation. Nobody is brushing this off anymore, and the intensity around it is only building. But let's start with something straightforward that anyone can observe because in today's world, pregnancy gets documented, especially when public figures are involved. Celebrity pregnancies are everywhere across social media. Photos, videos, candid moments, raw, unfiltered glimpses, all of it captured and shared constantly. But with Erica, there is nothing. Not one clear and candid photo showing her visibly pregnant. Not one public appearance where a baby bump was visible. Not one paparazzi shot catching her off guard in a natural moment. Not one raw, unfiltered social media clip showing what every pregnant woman inevitably shows at some point during 9 months of a visible physical transformation. And this is someone whose entire public identity is built around being seen and staying visible at all times. God bless you. She records herself constantly on stages, on planes, at events, during emotional moments, in private settings she chooses to make public, which makes the complete absence of any pregnancy documentation significantly harder to dismiss as coincidence or personal choice around privacy. Because when Charlie passed, Erica had absolutely no hesitation about grabbing a camera and letting the entire world into the most intimate and devastating moments imaginable. She recorded herself kissing her husband's body. She shared that raw and unfiltered grief in real time with millions of people watching. No filter, no delay, no apparent concern about what was too private for public consumption. And that is precisely where the contradiction lands with real force. Because why was the pregnancy treated as something completely private and carefully protected from any public documentation while his passing was put directly in front of the entire world within hours? If privacy was genuinely the guiding principle behind how she operated, then why did it only apply to the pregnancy and to nothing else? I want to see what they did to my husband, and I want to give him a kiss, because I didn't get to give him a kiss this morning. That specific and pointed question is what pushed people to start digging significantly deeper. And once they did, things started looking considerably more confusing than they already were. Erica's entire social media presence is deliberately and consistently built around her identity as Mrs. Erica Kirk. Her whole online brand, her public image, her organizational authority, her media presence, all of it is tied directly to that name, that marriage, and that carefully maintained image. So, when the ultrasound clip surfaced, people immediately noticed something that didn't sit right at all. The name displayed on that ultrasound was not Erica Kirk. It showed her maiden name, Erica Frances Dom. Now, that could potentially be explained by paperwork, timing, or administrative processes. That possibility exists and deserves acknowledgement. But when your entire public brand and identity revolves around being Mrs. Erica Kirk in every context, in every public-facing moment, having your maiden name appear on something as significant and personal as an ultrasound feels genuinely inconsistent to a large number of people who were already looking closely. Story of the woman who raised Erica Kirk, her mom, Loretta France. Yeah, that's Erica Kirk getting an ultrasound. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not that woman has really ever been pregnant. Now, I've been pregnant 5 times. The first was a miscarriage, gave birth to 4. So, you bet your ass I zoomed in on that ultrasound screen, and this is a close-up of the screen, which led me to do a deep dive into the stages of pregnancy, which I've done, back in the day when I was pregnant, but it's been a while. Hard to see a lot of detail in that picture. Based on her stomach size and the size of what we can see, it would be safe to presume this is the viability ultrasound that they determine if there's heartbeat, which they can do as early as 6 weeks. This is what it looks like at 6 weeks, and this is what it looks like at 8 weeks. Wanted to compare that to her picture, but I don't have the technology to zoom in on it. I wasted 2 hours except I learned that at 9 weeks they hiccup. I didn't know that. Then there was another specific detail that added more weight to the growing questions. Charlie was not present during that ultrasound visit. Erica's first documented hospital visit connected to the pregnancy was with her mother Lori, not with her husband. When you place that detail directly alongside the complete absence of any visible pregnancy documentation across months of otherwise constant public presence, people start connecting those specific dots in ways that are difficult to presentation. Redirect and the noise around all of it only keeps getting louder rather than quieter as time passes. Small details start carrying enormous weight when there is almost no solid and verifiable supporting documentation to anchor the broader claims being made. And that reality brings everything to a deeper level of examination. People began noticing patterns of moments that might individually seem minor or explainable, but together create a picture that is genuinely confusing and resistant to simple explanation. There were documented instances where Erica struggled to recall important dates like her wedding anniversary and key family milestones. And those moments raised significant eyebrows among people who were already paying close. Because I know we had a birth plan, and the only thing that went to plan on that birth plan was that we had a child. That's right. Everything else would be we had a grade out the window. We had a great OB rest. Terrible. So sad, tension. Then there was that specific episode on Charlie's podcast where she stated her obstetrician was no longer living, which added yet another layer of questions to an already unclear and contested situation. But things take an even more dramatic and specific turn with recent claims from Candace Owens directly. She alleged that on the day Charlie was harmed, Erica may not have been where she publicly stated she was. Erica's stated account placed her at the hospital with her mother receiving treatment. That was the version of events she presented publicly and consistently. However, according to Candace's sources, there are specific claims placing her at a hotel suite in Fort Wuka instead. That is not a minor discrepancy that can be explained away easily. That is a serious and direct contradiction between two completely different physical locations, and it has people paying extraordinarily close attention to every detail of the timeline surrounding that specific day. At the time, Andrew Colbert was actively working to support and reinforce Erica's version of the timeline, stating that she had dinner with Charlie the night before and was with family members on September 9th. We laugh about this because our dates are so messed up because of babies, meaning there's so many dates to remember. He even shared a photo that Erica herself reportedly took, showing her hand as supposed visual evidence of her location and presence with family at 8:33 a.m. Pacific time before heading into her day. But now, new claims are suggesting a completely and fundamentally different version of those specific events. There are allegations that Erica was not at home the night before Charlie passed and that she was instead with Tracy Martin, someone she has known for well over a decade and who was a significant presence in her life long before Charlie ever entered the picture. That single claim shifts the entire emotional and factual angle of the story in a dramatic way. Because if she was not with her mother at the hospital, as she stated, then the question that follows becomes completely impossible to set aside. Why say she was? What purpose does that specific misdirection serve? And what does it suggest about other parts of the timeline that have been accepted without sufficient scrutiny? Now, this is where everything splits visibly into two opposing sides, and both need to be acknowledged clearly and fairly. On one side, there are Erica's public statements, her documented timeline, and everything she has already shared with the public through various channels and appearances, where he was to tell his story, but he also had to include the part where he claims that he saw Erica Kirk the night before. Also on Fort Wuka at Candlewood Inn and Suites. Okay. On the other side, there are outside voices making specific claims that have not been fully verified through independent confirmation. And that gap between the two is precisely what keeps people locked into this story with sustained and growing intensity. Because here is the honest reality that needs to be said directly. A significant portion of what is currently circulating is still actively being debated. Some of it originates from secondhand sources, some from commentary and interpretation, some from people connecting dots that may or may not actually form the picture being suggested. That does not make the questions themselves wrong or invalid, but it does mean that not every claim circulating online can or should be treated as confirmed and established truth. And that distinction is what makes this entire situation so genuinely intense and so difficult to resolve cleanly. The absence of clear and consistent documentation has created enormous space for speculation to grow rapidly. And once that happens in a high-profile situation with millions of people paying attention, separating what is proven from what is assumed becomes progressively more difficult with each new development. Tracy Martin. Remember, Tracy Martin is Erica's best friend for over 15 years. How close are Erica and Tracy? They've done everything together. Tracy says from Romanian Angels. Erica modeled for her clothing brand. People are watching extremely closely now, not just for statements and public appearances, but for actual evidence that can either support or directly challenge the specific claims being made. Because at the absolute center of all this noise is one critical issue: credibility. And right now, that credibility is being tested in real and very public time. People have been pointing out the long and extensively documented history between Erica and Tracy. Years of photos, shared trips, holidays, and significant life moments that clearly demonstrate they were genuinely close over a sustained period of time. Tracy appears repeatedly throughout that documented visual history, and even her daughter McKenna has been mentioned as someone who worked closely alongside Erica in a professional capacity. On the surface, that can appear to be nothing more than a tight and long-standing friendship or a trusted and familiar inner circle. But online, certain observers have begun reading significantly deeper into those connections and the specific timing of various interactions and appearances. Seeing Charlie in an elevator, everything about Charlie is adding up. I cannot get a single person to confirm that they saw Erica, who was apparently out and about. I then thought, wouldn't it make sense? She screams in the middle of a parking lot. She screams in the middle of a doctor's office. Everybody kind of knows where they were when Charlie got, okay, if this doctor's office had people in it, there's going to be someone who said, hey, I heard a giant scream at my doctor's office. And once speculation of that nature kicks in at scale, it does not slow down on its own. It accelerates. There are theories spreading that extend well beyond what can actually be established through any available evidence, particularly when they involve specific claims about Erica's family and how various situations were managed. Behind the scenes, none of those specific claims have been confirmed through any verifiable source. The reason they continue spreading with such persistence is directly connected to the earlier gaps that people identified and that were never adequately addressed publicly. The missing pregnancy documentation, the timeline questions, the details that simply refuse to line up cleanly. That combination of unresolved inconsistencies is what keeps the conversation alive and growing. Not because there are clear and definitive answers available, but precisely because there are still far too many things that have never been fully or satisfactorily explained. And once a story reaches this specific threshold, it stops being about any single claim or any single moment. It transforms into a comprehensive examination of everything connected to it. Every post, every clip, every timeline detail, every public statement gets pulled out and re-examined through this new lens. People are no longer asking one isolated question. They are stacking questions on top of questions. This is shocking that Tracy's daughter is actually Erica's assistant. I'll put in allegedly there because we've got to confirm that information. But the source knows the timeline inconsistencies, the missing visual documentation, the contrast between public and private choices, the location discrepancies, all of it goes under the microscope simultaneously. And when clear answers don't arrive quickly or convincingly, that silence begins speaking just as loudly as any formal statement ever could. At the same time, something important needs to be acknowledged directly. Online discussions in high-profile situations like this one move extremely fast, and not everything being said carries the same evidentiary weight. Some points are grounded in real and documentable observations that deserve serious consideration. Others are built entirely on assumptions that haven't been tested against any verifiable facts. But even with that critical distinction clearly in mind, the pressure around this situation does not ease. Once credibility becomes the central issue in a public conversation of this scale, every single detail matters more than it ordinarily would. People search for consistency, for clarity, for anything that either confirms the story being presented or provides genuine reason to challenge it. And Tyler was there. Tyler Boyer. Yes, he was there with his wife, his beautiful wife, and his kids. And he came up to me afterwards and he was like, hey, we're starting this, or we have this organization and we're starting in Arizona. Would love for you to be a part of it. And it said, thank you for all the information, but I am moving to Manhattan. And I was like, stay in touch. And we didn't really stay in touch all that. Right now, that search is exactly where things stand. A dense mix of questions, competing claims, and extraordinarily close public attention, all building simultaneously into a situation where millions of people are waiting and watching to see what surfaces next. And the conversation keeps taking additional turns as people attempt to connect every loose and unresolved detail, suggesting those details might explain the ultrasound name inconsistency or why specific parts of the story were kept so tightly controlled in private, while other equally personal moments were broadcast without apparent hesitation. But then the focus shifts to an even larger and more fundamental question. What did Charlie actually know? Was he fully aware of everything happening around him? Or was he seeing the same carefully managed version of events that the public was shown? That specific question alone has kept people talking in sustained and serious ways because it touches something deeper than any single factual inconsistency. It raises the possibility that the person most central to this entire story may have been operating with incomplete and deliberately managed information about his own life and marriage. New names have begun circulating in connection with the paternity question specifically, and that is when the conversation shifts from general and broad speculation into very specific and targeted claims. But the key point that must be stated clearly remains consistent. Those specific claims about paternity and personal relationships have not been verified through any confirmed and independent evidence. The timing is what continues fueling the conversation and keeping it at its current intensity. There are reports suggesting that before everything happened, the marriage was experiencing serious and significant tension, that things were not in a healthy or stable place behind the closed doors of what was being publicly presented as a strong and faith-centered partnership. If that part carries any truth, it adds an entirely new layer of complexity and context to the broader story. Because when people believe there were already significant cracks in the foundation behind the scenes, they begin viewing every previously accepted detail through a completely different and more suspicious framework. Moments that once appeared entirely normal suddenly get questioned with new intensity. Small details that were previously overlooked start carrying dramatically more weight in the overall picture people are constructing. The focus consistently returns to consistency as the central measure. Do the timelines actually match when placed carefully side by side? Do the public statements align with what documented evidence suggests was happening privately and behind the scenes? Are there gaps that remain unrest and unexplained, despite the sustained public attention and pressure? Those are the driving questions behind the ongoing conversation, and they're not going away regardless of how many times the official version gets restated. There are also specific details around the final days that people continue returning to, with particular focus reports that Charlie was not wearing his wedding ring, that he slept separately from Erica on the final night, and that their last moments together may not have carried the warmth and connection that the public version of their marriage consistently projected. Then there is the letter, the deeply personal and emotionally charged message that Erica chose to share publicly after his passing. That decision alone sparked intense debate about motive, timing, and what sharing something that intimate in such a public way was actually designed to accomplish. Some critics have raised specific questions about the letter's authenticity and origin. Others believe it straightforwardly reflects how Charlie felt in that specific moment and should be accepted as such. But without confirmed and independently verifiable evidence settling the question definitively, those opposing positions remain open and continue dividing opinion with no clear resolution in sight. The reported location discrepancies around the time everything happened continue to keep people paying particularly sharp attention because conflicting accounts about where Erica was on that specific day represent exactly the kind of concrete and verifiable claim that could either be confirmed or refuted through actual documentation. When you combine the reported marital tension, the timeline questions, the location contradictions, and the details that persistently refuse to align cleanly, it creates a situation where people naturally feel compelled to ask bigger and more fundamental questions. Not because definitive answers are available, but because the story as presented continues to feel incomplete in ways that matter. And until genuine clarity backed by real and independently verified evidence arrives, this conversation is not moving toward any resolution. It is only getting louder with each passing development. The story at this stage is no longer being driven by any single detail or claim. It is the accumulated weight of everything combined that sustains the pressure. Each unresolved question adds to that weight, and each new inconsistency keeps the spotlight exactly where it has been for months. There is also a growing and important awareness that speculation can run dramatically ahead of established facts in situations like this one. Some claims sound dramatic and some sound genuinely convincing in isolation, but without solid and independently verified proof behind them, they remain in that uncertain and contested space where they can neither be accepted nor definitively dismissed. That distinction matters critically because real answers must ultimately be grounded in actual evidence rather than in assumption, interpretation, or the sheer accumulated force of repetition. Even so, the attention around this situation does not fade. If anything, it intensifies with each new development because the more gaps people identify, the more urgently they want those gaps filled with something verifiable and definitive. Right now, everything is still sitting in that unresolved zone. Public statements, online theories, competing timelines, and specific details that don't yet connect cleanly into a coherent and fully supported picture. And until something clear and verified steps in to finally settle the central questions, this situation stays exactly where it is, under an extraordinarily powerful microscope with millions of people watching closely for whatever surfaces next. Any alleged DNA report has not been publicly confirmed, and that must be stated clearly and consistently. Much of what is currently being discussed remains in the territory of speculation, rather than established fact. Candace's ongoing series has definitely continued, adding significant fuel to the conversation with consistent hints that additional information may be coming. At the same time, certain names keep resurfacing throughout different points in Erica and Charlie's documented story before they met during the marriage itself. And now, in active discussions about what may have gone fundamentally wrong, when people notice patterns repeating across different contexts and timelines, questions follow naturally and inevitably. That is simply how this process works. But here is the honest and important bottom line: patterns raise eyebrows and create legitimate questions. But they are not proof on their own, and right now a significant portion of what is being shared and amplified across platforms has not been supported by clear, independently verified evidence. The questions are not going away. People want genuine clarity about the timelines, about where everyone actually was, and about why specific and documented details continue refusing to line up with the story being officially presented. So now it comes down to you. What do you actually think about everything being discussed right now? Do these accumulated details raise real and legitimate concerns that deserve serious answers? Or has this situation been pushed into territory that the available evidence simply cannot support? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments. Hit like, subscribe for ongoing updates as this continues developing, and share this with someone who has been following this story closely. Stay tuned, because if anything new surfaces, you already know we are breaking it all down the moment it happens.